Hello, hello. Welcome to today's live. Today we are talking about Alpha Omega's Life Pack curriculum. So I thought it would be a little bit different, maybe a little more helpful to do a live review. Normally I record these and do a lot of editing and all that, but I tend to be a little slow about getting those recorded videos out. So I thought it might be a little faster and easier to do it live. That way, if anyone wanted to ask questions during the live, I could answer them right now, right as I'm showing it to you. So I thought that might be a little more helpful today. So to be clear, it is Alpha Omega's Life Pack curriculum. I don't think I made that clear before. I just said Alpha Omega, but Alpha Omega actually has several curriculum options available for homeschoolers. And so, but the only ones that I'm going over or that I've even used are the Life Pack, these Life Pack workbooks. You see that here? So that's what I'm going to be going over today. I'm currently using them for the first time this year with my fifth grader and my third grader. So my fifth grader is doing the history and geography um, pack, life packs for fifth grade, and science as well. And then my third grader is also doing science with these. So this is our first experience with the Alpha Omega life packs. And thought I'd share with you. And I actually had a question during one of my curriculum review videos. I did have a viewer ask if I would go a little more in depth with these options in particular. So that's what I'm doing. Going a little more in depth of them today. If you ever have any questions during this review, please feel free to put them into the comments, enter the chat, and ask your question in there, and I will do my best to answer it for you. Okay, so I did do a poll a day or two ago on YouTube. I asked, what do you want to learn the most when you watch a homeschool curriculum review? And 60% of people said that the thing they want to learn the most are the pros and cons of the curriculum. And I totally get you. I find it's not that helpful to know whether or not the person loves it or not, if the mom loved the curriculum or not. I want to know why. And learning the pros and cons can help with that. So I'm going to try to point those out during the course of this review. I'm going to first go over the general information about the curriculum, like where you get it and kind of how it works and all. And then we'll have an inside look at it. I'm planning an overhead shot, so hopefully that works out fine. An overhead shot so I can flip through the workbooks and show you a few things, and I thought that'd be helpful. So we'll get an inside look at these particular parts, these work texts themselves. So we'll do that, and then at the end, I'll give you my thoughts and answer the question of, will I ever use them again? I think I answered this question in the curriculum review, so you may know the answer already, but I'll answer it here at the end of this review. And throughout all that, I'll spell out some pros and cons, especially at the end, so stick around for that. Okay, so what should we talk about first? Well, first of all, let's do this overview of these they call them work texts, I believe. I'm just going to call them I'll probably flip back and forth between workbook and work text. All right, so in each grade level subject set of books, there's 10 sets of these for each grade level and subject, I believe. There may be a subject there's not 10. The ones I have, there's 10 work texts, so there's 10 of these. I grabbed unit 10. Do you see that? I grabbed unit 10 of each of these so I can show them to you, but there's 10 of these. And this, to me, is one of the pros. I love that that instead of having a big workbook to deal with or a big textbook to deal with, we just have these thin little workbooks. And this one's for the fifth grade level. The third grade level is even thinner. So you see how it's much thinner, so there's less material in it than for the fifth grade. So I love that there's only 10 of these. I feel that like it gives you a sense of completion several times throughout the school year. And instead of only having that sense of completion at the end of the school year, if ever. So I like that a lot. I also like that you can choose each of the work texts or workbooks cover certain material, especially like for the science. For history and geography, obviously you're going through historically. So obviously that's going to have different material in each. But wait, I grabbed the wrong one. Science. But like for science, this third grade unit, it covers change, sound, and heat. That's what's listed for what this work text covers. So since each one covers different material, you could choose to use only certain of them. And I think that's a pro as well. You could decide that if you don't want to cover all of this material in one school year, you can look through and easily see what do I want to cover and just grab those. So definitely a pro. Each of the work texts also has a pull-out test. So you see here, this one has this pull-out test. Here it's like 2 pages. And this test covers the material in this test covers the materials in this particular workbook. And I think that's a nice way to, a really nice setup for the curriculum because it's very obvious and simple to use. You have your test in the workbook, so if you only want to use this, let's say 5 of the workbooks for the school year, they have the test in there already, and that makes things kind of easy breezy. I like that. So that's a plus. So when you purchase, if you purchase the set, I think they usually come like in a box. So you'll have like the 10 workbooks in there with the pull-out tests in there. You'd also want to get the teacher's guide. I'm not sure if they come with a set or not, but you want to make sure you get that. So teacher's guide looks very similar. This is, does it even say? Yeah, it says here, science teacher's guide. And this is for all of 5th grade. So this subject for this grade level, all of the work texts are in here. And this has the answers in here. So the answer keys, some teacher's notes, and we'll go over this more in depth in a few minutes. And a little bit after we look at the workbooks. So you'll want to make sure you get the teacher's guide. And then for science, there's a couple of extra things. You can purchase a lab kit through Alpha Omega that contains materials like some of the supplies you'll need for the experiments for that grade level. So you want to get the correct grade level of them. This I'll talk about a little bit more later. I didn't love this kit that I purchased through Alpha Omega. There's another one you can get through Nature's Workshop, and I purchased Nature's Workshop lab kits before, and I really liked them and how they were set up. So we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But just to make life easier, I would totally it's totally worth the money to get a lab kit. So you don't have to run around looking for these things. Also, this was something I thought was really nice through Alpha Omega and it's a pro, it's getting, you can get a DVD of the experiments for, I don't think you could for 3rd grade. I didn't see it for 3rd grade, but I know for my 5th grader. There was an available DVD for the experiments, which is really helpful if you don't want to do the experiment for some reason. Not gonna lie, there's times I'm not interested in an experiment, or when one doesn't work out the way you expected. So like this year, my 5th grader, when he was doing some of the microscope stuff, some of the microscope experiments involving microscopes, we had some issues and weren't seeing kind of what they were wanting you to see. And so the experiment DVD really came in useful because it shows you what you should be finding, what you should be looking for. Because, experiments don't always work out. So that was definitely a pro. I hadn't seen that. Had I seen that before? I don't remember seeing that before. I've never used an experiment DVD like this. So that was really helpful. I mean, you can always look up videos on YouTube and all, and I do some of that too, but it makes it much simpler if you know you have an approved video exactly covering what's being covered, the instructions in the science experiment, and it's super helpful. That's a pro. If you're someone who's averse to experiments like I am sometimes, that might be something you really, I mean, that might be a decision maker for you right there. And I don't blame you for it. All right, so now we're going to look at Safari. Well, not Safari, but I'm going to switch over to Safari so I can show you a little more information about the curriculum on the website, and just a little more information. Then we'll talk about curriculum systems and then get into the insides, the innards of these workbooks. So let me get myself situated. Let's flip on over there. All right, so let me make sure you can see this. Okay. All right, so first of all, here's the Alpha Omega website. As you can see, it's at aop.com, and as you can see, they have several curriculum options. They have an online option, Monarch, and I think it covers what's in the Lifepacs. I'm really not sure how that's set up. There's the Lifepacs, which we're going over today. They have Horizons. They have a Christian Academy, and so they have some different options. So today, what I'm really just talking about are the Lifepacs. And if we go to Shop Lifepac, let's see. You'll see they have the different options. The Lifepacs are supposed to be the way it's different is the Lifepacs are supposed to be more independent, self-paced, a more independent, self-paced option, while Horizons is teacher-led, and these are unit studies here. But I really wanted a self-paced option. One thing to note is that this curriculum is Christian based. If it's not secular, so if you're looking for something secular, this isn't for you, especially the science. But it is a Christian based curriculum. Okay, so then you go by grade. So for example, let me just go to 5th grade, and then here's the subjects offered. I'm going to just choose history and geography. And then here's some options for you how to purchase it. So I wanted to look at this because I wanted to point out that you can get the whole set, which includes these 10 workbooks. What else? It includes the 10 workbooks. And it looks like it also includes the teacher's guide and a scope and sequence. And as well, let me back up here. You can get the individual work text. So this is what I was talking about, where you could decide, you can look at these and like, well, here's what I want to cover, and just purchase those. And I thought that was kind of a neat option. But I want to look here at the scope and sequence so you can see that. Let's look at the scope and sequence. So when you're determining your academic objectives, which hopefully you do, there's certain things you're going to want to cover in your homeschool. And like for me personally, I cover my academic objectives in a different way every year. Sometimes I'm very specific, and sometimes I'm very general. Where I feel like there's a lot of leeway in what we cover. For me, history and geography is usually one of those general things, and usually it's a combination of those two each year. Where in some subjects I'm very specific, I want to cover something very specific with my child, and other subjects I'm not as picky. And so, if you're on the pickier end of things, you are going to want to look at the scope and sequence. And it's nice that they provide that for you in an easy in a way that's easy to read. So when you look at the scope and sequence PDF, and what they send to you, they have pretty much everything in here. So you have kindergarten, and then like everything you cover, all the subjects in here. But so let's look at Bible for a minute, just as an example. Each of these is the work text. So you see there's 10 of them. And then you can see here's grade 7. Here's what's covered in each one. And so I think that's really nice. So history and geography, I have the 5th grade for that. So I could look on here and see, okay, we're covering U.S. history. And for us this year, my academic objective relating to history and geography for my 5th grader was I wanted to cover Civil War on, and because we covered, I think, up to the Civil War last year. And so I looked here and I thought, oh, starting off with a new war, I don't know if I want to do that. But as I continued, I saw that we get to Civil War, it's covering things much more quickly. It's not as in depth. Although there's a lot of information in there, believe me. And so I thought, okay, I'm okay with that. I'll go ahead and get this because I see that Unit 5 we cover the Civil War, and then we move on past that already and continue on to modern America in Unit 10. So, so this scope and sequence may be really helpful to you as you're figuring out, as you're trying to narrow down your curriculum choices. So that's definitely a pro that they provide that to you in such an easy to understand and nicely laid out way. Now, I will say, and this can be a pro or a con, depending on your opinion, your thoughts. It is a lot of material that's covered in each of these workbooks, like a lot of material, and it's in typical textbook fashion. I mean, it's not living literature in any stretch of the imagination at all. It's typical workbook fashion or textbook fashion, and I'm okay with that for myself and even for my kids. I find that if you're really interested in a topic, that doesn't matter as much because you're going to enjoy it anyway. But it is a little bit dry, and then it's a lot of information. So for me, this was a con because if you're going to, I got the whole set and for each of these subjects and grade levels. And if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to cover this in this school year, it would have required, the way I wanted to cover the information, it would have required doing, and this is how we started off, working out these workbooks like 4 times a week at least, unless they want to cover a lot each day. And I just don't want to do history and science 4 times a week. For me, my focus, especially for the elementary years, is math and language arts. I think that's where my focus needs to be. And this was just kind of getting in the way of that. So I switched it. I redid our lesson planning. So we're working out these workbooks just twice a week each. And I'm happy with that. But that means that we probably won't finish the material by the end of the school year, which is okay. Like, you don't have to finish them, and they're still going to be learning. But if I'd known ahead of time, so for me, this was a con, how much material is covered. And if I had known it ahead of time, I probably just wouldn't have even purchased like these earlier. I would have just started with Unit 5. Since that's really where I wanted to get to. I would have purchased Units 5 through 10, and then that's it. So I wish I'd realized. And so that's why I'm sharing that with you, so that you can maybe make a different decision for yourself. Have all the information available to you. So, think about maybe purchasing individual work text instead of the full box set of each, covering just what you want to cover, and so that you can do as much or as little of each subject as you want to each year. I will remind you to always look at your local homeschool laws. You can look at hslda.org to see what your local homeschool laws are. to get guidance about how much you should be covering and what subject you should be covering, because you may have some pretty strict guidelines in your state or area. So always look at your local homeschool laws. For us, we have a lot of leeway with science, especially. And so I could have made a different, I could have just bought like half of these work texts, spent less money and spent less time on it, spend as much time as I thought was helpful for my kids. So that's something to think about. Also, I wanted to hop over and show you, well, let me back up here, show you that you can get the science kits. Let me see if I can find where that is real quick. Maybe it was in other. Well, let's just go to science. And so you see here, here's the science lab kit. And some information about what's in there. And then did you notice the DVD that you could purchase? Another place you can get science lab kits is here on Nature's Workshop. And this I've purchased from Nature's Workshop before to get Apologia science lab kits, and I really like them. It was totally worth the money to me. Totally worth it. It was nicely laid out. They had like a baggie for each science experiment, and then a baggie for like some general stuff that you might use through a bunch of experiments, and each one was labeled nicely, and then there's a handout which gave more information. I really liked the way it was set up, and so I guess expecting something of that from the Alpha Omega science kit, and it wasn't like that. And I found it to be really frustrating to use. Everything's just kind of in there and not really labeled, or not labeled well enough to my liking, to make things easy and quick for me. And so I've regretted buying it. I found that Nature's Workshop does have these, but notice that when you go here to curriculum and kits, you don't see it here. But if you search for Alpha Omega, then you'll see these kits. So like here's the 5th grade kit, and sideways we can see it's for the Lifepac grade 5. Now, I didn't purchase these, so I don't know how they're set up as nicely as the Apologia ones were. I'm making the assumption they are set up that nicely, so I would recommend maybe considering these Alpha Omega kits or these Nature's Workshops lab kits instead of the Alpha Omega ones, because I haven't really been happy, and it's actually a little less expensive, it looks like. So that's something to think about. Okay. Now, as far as, let me switch my camera here. All right, as far as how you would use these, let's start talking about that. How do you use this curriculum? It's a pro of it is that it is flexible enough to use, like in the way it comes to you. Well, this is the teacher's guide. And the way it comes to you, it's flexible enough to use in a few different curriculum systems. And I talk about curriculum systems in another video, which I can link down below. So if you're curious about that, go ahead and take a look at that later. But the curriculum systems that you could use this with are the weekly binder system. That's how I'm using them with my kids. If the whole thing, like if all the material for 5th grade, or in this case 3rd grade, was in one workbook, I'd have to tear that workbook apart. You can go and take get the spine taken off, and then just get the pages in there. But since these are much thinner, I'm able to just put it behind their science tab on one of those like magazine holder things. Now, the 3rd grader one works better in that than the 5th grader. There is more material in the 5th grade books. A little bit more. It's a little bit thicker. If it were any thicker, that wouldn't be a great solution. And I've already had some of those magazine holder things. They're plastic, they break. And so they've broken. But even when they're broken, if you get the tabs with the pockets in them, you can easily slip them in there. And so the dividers, the binder dividers with the pockets, those plastic dividers, these fit in the pocket just fine. And so that's been really nice because one of the weaknesses of the weekly binder system is that you don't have all the material in there. Normally, you just have the material in there for each subject for the week. And that's problematic if you have to refer back to previous material. So since this whole thing I put in there, we don't have that issue. And then after they take the test or after they finish the workbook, I just put in the new one. So that's one way to use these, and that's how I'm using it. You can also use these in a workbox system. These will work nicely in there. Just have a workbox or a drawer for let's say science in this case, and then you can put the materials you need, other materials you need in there. You can put the experiment DVD in there. If your student's doing an experiment that day, you can put the materials, take them out of the science kit or whatever, wherever you have them, and put them into the drawer. So this will work nicely in a workbox system, or if you just use a checklist system, you can put these fit nicely on a shelf. You can put the whole set of them and like a magazine holder, and a set will fit in there. Well, you may need two. It depends on the size of the magazine holders, but you can put them in there, and they just take them off the shelf. So so those are the curriculum systems that it will work for. They're not going to work with a digital curriculum system, which I love because as far as I know, you can't get a PDF, an electronic version of these workbooks. So that's disappointing. To me, that's a con. It is flexible enough to use in other ways with other curriculum systems, several other curriculum systems. So that's a pro. But the con is that I can't get the electronic version. Maybe that's because they do have that Monarch online homeschooling option, and it may cover the exact same stuff. I don't know. I haven't used it. So I guess if you want a more digital curriculum system, especially if you're like do road schooling, you travel a lot, or you leave the house a lot, and do school elsewhere, and you want to be able to do things electronically, you may want to consider their Monarch option instead. Okay, so now let's get into some more specifics into how I use it by doing an overhead shot. Let's see if this works. I'm going to try to get this to happen. Let me move things aside a little bit, and I'll move things aside, and we can take a look inside inside these workbooks. So let's see. So do you see that? Let's see if it comes up. All right, there we go. If you don't see this, let me know, because I want you to be able to see it. This is key to this whole video. All right, so we see here the workbooks. I've got the science and history workbooks that I've purchased. I'll put the teacher's guide aside for now. We'll look inside it in a few minutes, in a little bit. But first, let's go over lesson planning. First, I'll just show you the insides of these. So you see, here's Unit 10 for science for 3rd grade. And these are the things that are covered. So change, sound, and heat are the topics covered in this one, in this work text. And then there's a section for each. And notice there's some work here, and then a self-test. And then they change topics, more work, a self-test, change topics, self-test, and then the Lifepac test, that's a pull out. So I always pull these out before I give them to them. And let me just show you the test real quick. So get a little peek into how that's done. Something I don't like is that when you take them out, it's 2 pages. That bugs me. It just does. I've used ACE PACES, which are, let me show you. I don't know if you've ever used these. The reason I chose the Alpha Omega Lifepacs is because they're similar to these, and it's a similar idea where there's one little almost pamphlet style thing, and it covers certain subjects or certain topics, and then you move on. And when you pull out the test from this, it's not broken up like this. And so to me, that's a con. It just bothers me, especially with little kids that lose things and tear things up easily. So anyway, so you do the test at the end, and if they've done well on the test and we feel they've know the material sufficiently, then you can just kind of move on. But I believe there's an alternate test, maybe in the teacher's guide, that if they did not learn the material to your satisfaction, they can go back and study some more and then try again with another test. So that would be a pro, that there's some flexibility in doing assessments. All right, so when you look in here, let's look at just this change, sound, and heat section, the first topics covered in here. See, there's some objectives, which to me, I wish that kind of wasn't there. And then some introductory material and some vocabulary words. So what I do with them usually is I make sure they can pronounce all these vocabulary words. So I just have them read them out loud to me, and then they can read them on their own. And then how these work texts function is that the information is right here. So that's another pro, that there's not a separate textbook. All the material is in these work texts. So I guess that's why they call them work texts, because it's a combination workbook textbook. So there's some reading to do. They can do on their own. They read through here, and then there's some questions to answer, some kind of activity. And then there's more reading, and then questions to answer about that reading. So that's how this functions. And so for lesson planning, what I do is I have them just read one of these. To me, a daily portion is just the reading up to answering questions and activity, and then that's it for the day. And so when I do that, I'm only doing it twice a week with them. We're not covering all this information in 1 year. So that's how that works. That's unfortunate. I guess I could have them like double up, but to me that's too much. I think taking in one section of reading and then answering questions on it and kind of taking that in, that's sufficient to me. So you can, for your lesson planning, I believe you can go on to Homeschool Planet's Lesson Plan Marketplace. Let me switch over and show that to you. So, like here, if you go to Homeschool Planet, and then you go to their marketplace, having to see past this holder for my phone. Awkward, so professional. Anyway, there's the lesson plans and curriculum. If you go in here, I think that's what I did, and was able to purchase for Homeschool Planet. I was able to purchase the ready-made lesson plans. So let's see if we can find these in here. They have a lot of different options. So you'd have to use Homeschool Planet as your solution for lesson planning, and then these lesson plans get imported into Homeschool Planet. And let me just do a quick search. Let's see if they have this. Let me just try Alpha Omega. Well, I see that they have horizons and all. So I think this is what I did, because I have a lot of text in let me just look at this one. I have a lot of text in my lesson plans. I don't think I went in and populated all that. So anyway, this is one option for your lesson planning. So this helps out a lot when it comes to lesson planning. And then, so I started off, I think, with 4 days a week, and then I changed it to 2 days a week. So that was helpful to me. You could go in, and I think the way they did it was where they just kind of had them do, like I said, where you do one section of reading and then activity, and then that's it for the day. But you can change that up. I just think that that's sufficient for a day, for a day's worth of work. So then if we talk about learning preferences, like the learning methods and social needs for a student, you can see that this would work well for kids who like the written word, because it is, it is textbook style information. And then they're reading that, and then they're writing out answers. And so you can see how someone who would like the written word, this would be really good for them if that's what captures their attention. For visual kids who maybe want to see a chart or a diagram or pictures, and that's what captures their attention, this could work for them as well. If you look at, so let's look at an example here. I mean, you've seen as we've flipped through, there's lots of nice pictures and all, but I thought like this was nice. See if you can see this. This little diagram here, the life cycle of a fly. And so this is the information in a diagram form. And there's lots of examples of this in the workbook. So like this is the seasons change as the earth revolves around the sun. So there's a little diagram of that. So that's nice. Another example, let's say for 5th grade science, let's look in this one. So this one is showing like a little bird hatching, getting out of its shell. So besides the diagrams, they have some nice helpful pictures like those, which I think are nice. And I will say I really have been enjoying the visual aspects of these workbooks. They're beautifully done, beautifully laid out, and good images to use for learning. So for a kid who likes to learn that visual aspects capture their attention, this may be enough for them. It depends on your kid, but this may be enough for them. All right, so how about kids who like interactive? That being interactive with the material is what captures their attention. Interacting with the information. Well, as we've flipped through, you've probably seen some like word search and crossword puzzle type things. Some interactive kids may really like that kind of stuff. So let me show you an example in here. Some of those activities, I think I wrote the wrong page down. Is this history and geography, page 69? Well, let's see if we can flip through and find an example, because I wrote the wrong page down. So you've got some maps. What else we got here? A lot of maps. Those are great for kids who like to interact with the material, and for visual kids. Maybe it was the science. We'll look through here. I like that image so much. This is a nice little image as well for those visual kids. And see if we can. This is a fun little maze. I thought an interactive kid might really love that. I like some of these little puzzles and activities. I find I have one kid who likes to interact with his information, and he likes, like, every type of interaction isn't the same for him. Maybe this is the page I was looking for. So sometimes there's a table like this to fill out, even in my 3rd graders. And that's a way to interact. That kind of combines interactive and visual elements. And sometimes there's some drawing activities. These I find are less common, and I can tell you right now, my 5th grader's not going to like that, because he does not like to draw, but some kids really love that kind of thing. And so those are some examples. Let's see if I can find in here in geography. It's going to be similar activities. It's mostly workbook style, and that's also an interactive element, and allows things to be independent, which is why I chose it. My interactive child does really well with this workbook style because he'll kind of skim the material, and then um, he gets to the questions and realizes, oh, maybe he didn't take it all in. So this captures his attention, makes him go back and avoids the skim, or it doesn't avoid the skim, but it counteracts the skim of material. And so that's helpful for him. Love these maps. Okay, so kids who need to interact with the material, especially because of the workbook style, this will be great for them, I think. If what they're wanting to do is a game or something, not so much. If that's the kind of interaction, not so much. But for other kids where workbooks work for them and some little puzzles here and there, maybe a little drawing activity, this will be really good for them. All right, and then for social need, this is best for independent kids since it is self-paced, and that's the intent of these, to be self-paced. We lesson planning, like I mentioned. If you're not into lesson planning, you could just say, hey, do a little bit out of the book each day or on these particular days, and they might just read through and do kind of like what we just said, where they answer some questions, they're like, okay, I'm done. Or they might be really interested in the topic and want to continue on. And so if you have a kid who especially loves a topic and they love to learn independently, then this might be a really good option for you. Now, for assessments, as I mentioned before, there's 3 self-tests per so this is the 5th grade history and geography, and you can see 3 self-tests in here and then a pull-out test, which I don't have with me. But let's look at one of these self-tests. So you see the self-test looks very much like a regular test. And so what I tell my kids, I tell them to challenge themselves to do the self-test without looking back at the material, and to just go through here and do the self-test without looking back. And then the ones that they have trouble with, or they question, which they don't know as well, to circle that number. That way they know that's something that they have to study a little extra hard, put a little more effort into. And then go back and look for the answer if they can find the answer. So that's how we do that. And then there's the pull-out test that I mentioned. After they complete the book and done the final self-test, you can have a day where they just study and then do your test after that. Now, you may feel that the self-tests are sufficient. My 5th grader, we just do the self-test for him. And because the tests stress him out so much that it's just not worth it. I'm trying to work him up to that, to taking a test like this. For him, what I do is he uses Quizlet. We love Quizlet in our homeschool. That's great for interactive kids as well. It's basically digital flashcards. And I think I've been able to find already made sets for this material in Quizlet, or at least for my 5th grader. My 3rd grader doesn't use it, but my 5th grader does. And there's kind of a self-test or a practice test option in there. And so he goes over this material so much in that way, I don't feel like I need to do the test. It just stresses him out without a whole lot of benefit. There's negatives, but no positives, in my opinion, for my 5th grader. But for you, having a test may be a pro. I think it's a pro that the self-tests are very much a pro, because it gives you some flexibility in how you use the curriculum. Okay, so let's see. Let's look at the teacher's guide. So you can see what you have to work with. You absolutely need the teacher's guide for reasons I'll share with you. besides the fact that it has the answers in there. All right, so the teacher's guide, you can see this is for 5th grade science. And so for all of you see here all the units 1 through 10, has all the information there. It has answer keys for the workbooks, and then answers for the test. There's a scope and sequence in here as well, but this is going to be just for science. And it does have in here, which I think is nice, for each grade. And this might help in your planning, especially during this time of the school year when you're thinking about what you'll be covering, what curriculum you'll be using in the next school year. You can see that, like if I were going to use this next school year, I can look ahead and get an idea of what material they cover in science and how they cover it. So this is nice. That's a pro, I believe. There's some information about test scoring. I just do regular, I found this a little bit confusing as I skimmed it. I just do regular percentages, out of 100. And some extraneous worksheets I don't feel are necessary, but then there's some teacher notes. And you can see here, so this is for Unit 1, so the first work text that covers cells, and it tells you what materials are needed. Like these are for science experiments, and then some additional learning activities. I don't use any of this because I bought the science kit, and I feel like this already has so much information in it, like this curriculum for the year. I don't need to do extra things. But for example, if you're using this for science, for your science loving kid who wants to do all the things, then hey, this may be a pro that you can even do more than just what they've given you. And then they have the answer keys. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you and be honest that I hate the way they do the answer keys. I hate them so much. Because look at the numbering here. Let's see if I can pull up the 5th grade. So notice that, did you notice in the workbook sections, like the worksheet pages, how instead of just being 41, 42, 43, it's 1.041, and that's telling you, I'm not sure that it's in like the first section. So then we go into section 2, and then the number in here is 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and so then when you go into the answer key to get your answers, that's how it's numbered. And maybe you love this. Give me your opinion. Maybe you love it. Maybe you think this is fantastic. I don't love it. For some reason, I'm always confused when I go to my answer key because it's a little bit different, as I'm hopping around from kid to kid and different subjects and checking things and grading. I always have to kind of stop and wrap my mind around how this is numbered, and it bugs the crap out of me. I much prefer the way that these ACE PACEs are done, where it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just regular numbering. How fabulous is that? And then when you look in the answer key, if you're grading page 3, you look for page 3, and then there's your answer. To me, that's very straightforward. I prefer that. Even when it, so let's look at this. So here you have page 14, 1 through 5, and then the exercises continued on to the next page. And even then they say, okay, now page 15, the answers for page 15, here they are. I find that, I much prefer that to the way that it's done in here. I just hate this so much. Am I unreasonable? I don't know. I have so much emotion over this. It just really irritates me. And so then you have your Lifepac test answers, and then there's this alternate Lifepac test. So if you weren't satisfied with how your child performed on the first test, you can maybe do some more studying, cover the material in a different way, or a little more, focus on some certain things, and then give them this alternative test. So then I guess you'd have to cut it out of here or what, I don't know, and let them do this test. And And then the answers are here. So the alternate test is here in the teacher's guide. It's not going to be on a pullout in your work text, just so you know. Okay. So I feel like this is a pro. I actually haven't used this option. I think with my oldest, if he were using this curriculum, I'd probably use it with him. Because sometimes you don't know, the purpose of a test is just to be an assessment of how they've taken in the information and how they've, are they remembering it? Have they processed it? Do they understand it conceptually and all? And the test tells you whether or not they have. If they haven't, then that's okay. I mean, it's not a big deal. It just means maybe we need to focus on some things. And so then you can go to the Lifepac test or the alternate test and then try again and assess again. So this is really nice. This is better than these. I like a lot of things about these. There's some things I don't, but one of the things I don't like is that if they don't do well on the final test, then you have to order the whole thing again and go over it again. And that's an expense, and it kind of interrupts things because then you have to wait for it to come in and all. So this is a pro for sure. Okay, so now I'm going to move all of these things aside, and we are going to go over my final thoughts about the Alpha Omega Lifepac curriculum option. Hello again. So all this out of the way. Okay. All right, so my final thoughts. And I've got some very specific thoughts here. First thought, maybe it's too much in each grade level for each subject. I kind of went over this earlier that to me it's too much. For me, and this is just a personal choice, I don't want science and social studies to have equal footing with math and language arts in our homeschool, especially when it comes to elementary school. High school is different. That's a different situation. But for elementary school, we tend to think, or I used to think of elementary school as like being the easy part of schooling. But after, I have 3 boys and I have an 8th grader, a 5th grader, and a 3rd grader currently. And so I've got one through elementary school, another almost done with elementary school, and then the third kind of working his way through, halfway through. I have realized that when it comes to math and language arts, elementary school is not easy. There's so much to cover. The topics may seem simplistic to us because we are experts at them now. That's that curse of knowledge where it's like, oh, it's so easy. Well, for a child who's at that level, it isn't that easy. They have to stop and think about it. It does take work. It does feel hard, difficult. And we do have special needs in our homeschool. Autism and a language disorder, and so that's affected things. And so for us, this personal choice that I have is that elementary school, the major thing for us is math and language arts. There's a lot to learn in order to set them up for middle school and high school to dig deeper into things. And I feel like if they have a very good foundation in math and language arts, that makes everything easier, including history and science. And so that's just my personal choice. So to me, it's too much material for 1 year. If I'd known, I would have ordered like half of the work text instead of the entire box sets. All right. I have thoughts about rigor as well. I know a lot of people love Alpha Omega Lifepacs. Is rigor one of the reasons? Maybe so. I do feel that the text part, like the textbook portion of each workbook, I would say those are rigorous. It's a lot of information for the year, but then even within each work text, it's a lot of information. More so for my 5th grader, I've noticed. My 3rd grader, it's not that big a deal, but for the 5th grader, I would say it is rigorous in how much information is presented for the student to be responsible for. And to you, that may be a pro, it may be a con. I'd say I give a thumbs up on that. That's a pro because we have covered information. My 5th grader has that, especially in science, that I wouldn't have thought that he'd cover. in fifth grade. And so that's a plus. However, the worksheet portion of the work text, of the activities, I'm going to give a thumbs down for those. I don't feel like they're as awesome as the text portion of it. It just feels like two different curriculum options. Um, and so let me spell out why. Like as we flip through, you saw there were some fun activities and some more search and crossword puzzle things. There's lots of multiple choice and fill in the blank, and then places to answer like in a paragraph form for the fifth grader anyway, for my fifth grader. And so that seems rigorous, and especially where it's like paragraph answers, that is rigorous. Like there's an appropriate level of rigor there, I feel. However, there have been several times, and this happened with each of these. I got the fifth grader, the history and science for my fifth grader, and also for the science for my third grader. And each one of those, at least one time in each one, there were times where when they went to answer a question, like they couldn't find the answer, or it was really not clear to them what the answer was supposed to be. And I remember one time in particular, this was with my third grader with science. He couldn't find the answer, and I'm like, well, dude, there's not that much. Like, it's got to be in there. I trusted the curriculum, and I made him go look for it. And then finally, like when they can't find the answer, I'll go and look for the answer and kind of point it out to them or give them a clue, because I want them to have that experience. Like that's part of learning. You go and look for the answers to your questions and find them. So that's usually what I'll do. But there was this one time, and this happened with my fifth grader as well, but it's very clear to me with my third grader when this happened, that I read the whole work text, the whole workbook, couldn't find the answer. And I found a place where maybe that was what they were supposed to be answering, but and I had the benefit of the teacher's guide and the answer in there, but it seemed like maybe they were supposed to infer something from like this one paragraph, but me as an adult, and I mean I'm no dummy, I wouldn't have inferred that from there. And so I had experiences like this in every single one of these subjects and grade levels that we've used, and that was extremely frustrating to me. So sometimes I felt like while the textbook portion of each workbook was rigorous, sometimes the activity portion with answering questions and all, it kind of mimicked rigor, when really it just wasn't a good question. Just wasn't a good question. Maybe this was an editing issue. I don't know. Another issue, so that's definitely a con that I finally I don't have trust in the activities. I kind of dread grading them, not just because of the weird numbering system, but because I'm like, okay, am I going to find the answer? Can they find the answer? Am I going to have to go looking through this book and try to figure out how they were expecting the student to find the answer? So to me, that's not rigorous. That's just not a good question. And so that's frustrating. Another issue I have with it is the Bible reflection part of it. I should have looked for an example in here, but let me just explain how this is done. Since this is Christian curriculum, there will be times where in the activities in the questions and answer section that they'll have the student look up a Bible verse and then kind of respond to that in light of the material that they covered. And so it sounds good, right? Some of those questions were better than others. I know my fifth grader, there were times like, I don't even know how I'm supposed to answer this. And to me, the reason why he struggled is because there wasn't guidance in how to do that. I compared this mentally to when we used BJU Press. A few years ago, we used their kind of American history textbooks. And I remember when my when my oldest did it, and he was probably fifth or sixth grade at the time, it was a similar thing, except they had much better questions. So they'd say, okay, look at this. First, they'd have them fully understand a topic. Maybe it's the issue of slavery, and the different positions that different people in the government or parts of the country had on that. This is just an example. And then, so there's a column where they have to write down and fully understand the positions of the different people involved on that topic. Then they'd have a column where they'd say, okay, now look at these verses. And they might be verses relating to history, to slavery, or how we treat our fellow man, and how God sees every people, individuals, men, women, no matter the color, no matter the gender, and all that. So they have them look at those verses and then say, okay, now what are these verses saying? So they understand the topic, they understand relevant scripture, and then the final column is just, okay, in light of what you understand about this passage and what you understand about the different positions of people on this topic, what position would you take on the topic? Or, who do you think is right and wrong when it comes to scripture? And there's not like a right or wrong answer to that. That's just teaching them how to understand an issue, understand scripture, and then kind of put them together and then come to a conclusion. And I really love that. That's night and day difference to how Alpha Omega does it. So I felt like the BJU Press workbooks were very well done, much better structured questions and answers. And, it was it's textbooks, similar type of educational style, where it's that textbook style with workbooks, worksheets, but done in a much better way. And so I didn't love that as well. I felt like it was paying lip service, but not taking the time to really help students learn how to come to conclusions on their own based on scripture. So to me, that was a big con. And it kind of ended up being somewhat of a waste of time. I would sit and discuss each of those questions with my child, and we'd have a little discussion. So I'd kind of treat them as a conversation starter. And so that's a good thing, and you kind of make the best of it. But since I had that experience with the BJU Press stuff, workbooks, or curriculum, I knew it could have been handled in a better way. All right, and then the science experiments. The science experiments are okay. I'm not going to say they're pro or con. I compared them to the curriculum we used last year. So last year we used the Science in the Beginning from Berean Builders, and that was an excellent curriculum. It was probably my favorite one, other than like the group aspect of it. That's why we didn't continue with it. But it was just so well done, and I was continuously impressed by how with every lesson there's an experiment to do. But I would call them elegant experiments, where you may not need anything extra. Just really the stuff you have in your kitchen, in your household for real. And they'd be very simple and straightforward, but very much get the idea across, help the student underlearn the concept. So I loved the experiments in the Science in the Beginning by Berean Builders, and so I couldn't help but compare the experiments in this curriculum to that, and found Alpha, the Lifepacs, lacking in that way. Like I said, I was frustrated with the science kits. And so we would watch the videos sometimes, and, we still do. And so that was definitely a pro that option was available. And then other times, the videos weren't always great, though. At least it was there, the experiment DVD, and there's something to watch. But I'll usually, if we use it, I'll also go on YouTube and look for another video, and kind of, so we can have a couple of different ways of looking at it. And so those are my thoughts on science experiments. Just wasn't really thrilled with them. All right, so to answer the question, would I use this again? And my answer is no. I'm not planning to use Alpha Omega Life Packs ever again. After finishing out this school year, or finishing out the work text that we have. I just find and the reasons are because my major reason is I don't have trust in the activities, where I'm always stressed out when I go to grade. And my fifth grader especially really doesn't like them. He's stressed out by them. So I just find the quality not to be as good as other curriculum options that I've used. So why continue with them? And so I'm like, I'll finish these because, I pay good money. I'm not going to throw them, not throwing away money, which is the way I see it. Just because I don't think it's perfect, because there's no perfect curriculum. We're continuing with it. But after these are done, not planning to continue with them anymore. So those were my thoughts on Alpha Omega's Life Packs. I hope that's helpful to you. I don't see any questions, so I will end here. I hope you have a great rest of Thursday and a great weekend. Let me know if there's any other reviews you'd like me to do on different curriculum options, and I will see you in the next live. Bye-bye.